Hello everybody and welcome to the Human Echoes recap for Westworld Season 2, Episode 10. This one's called The Passenger. And I'm just going to let you guys know right off the bat, this was not my favorite episode of Westworld. This was not my favorite season finale of Westworld. In a sense, for me, last week's episode was emotionally and sort of thematically a great wrap-up to the stuff that I wanted to see from, well, the Man in Black storyline, and we've seen a lot of wrap-ups for the other storylines already. This episode felt like the writers realizing they had still a bunch of threads hanging, and they're like, oh wait, it's episode 10. Oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. This one ends, and this one ends, and this one ends, and this one ends. And we got a cascade of endings, the like of which I have not seen since Lord of the Rings Return of the King. Maybe not even that doesn't really rival this. They're trying to wrap up so much stuff, and some of it was satisfying and some of it wasn't to me. I wish that they had maybe sort of cycled these stories through in the season rather than trying to have them all cascade to this one moment and then have to wrap up so much stuff. But we start with Dolores and Bernard running through their tests in the cradle, right? Dolores has set up another copy of Bernard. She is interviewing him. She's trying to test him for fidelity. And she says, essentially, you keep making the same mistakes. You keep going back to being the same person that made the same mistakes. I need to do something about this. I need to change you. And the essence of the episode, which I do like, by the way, they plant this seed in the very first scene that what we're going to be talking about this episode is the idea of choice and what it means to choose and what it means to change as a person and as a character in this show. Obviously, they're not all people, but whether change is possible and how to bring that about. And so I liked that seed planting. We move on to Dolores. She's sort of in the aftermath of Teddy shooting himself in front of her. She's not going to let that stand. And this is honestly something that bugged me a little bit just from a plot hole perspective, is that she opens his head up, yanks the core out, and his brain is still perfectly fine in there, which means that literally anybody who has been shot, because remember, he holds the gun up to his own head, point blank range, shoots himself, and the bullet does not penetrate the little shell around his brain. So anybody who's been shot, who's a robot previously in Westworld, even if it looked like they actually died, they, I guess, didn't. If somebody comes and pulls their brain out, like, they've killed the cradle, they've killed the backups, so there's a sense in which, you know, they can't be remade, but the version of them that's in that little pod, I guess, just still exists as long as somebody's there to yank the software and put it in new hardware. And that kind of makes Teddy's moment of, I want to say, self-sacrifice, his suicide here in the previous episode, mean a little bit less now, because we just know, like, oh no, his brain is still alive in there somewhere. Like, he didn't actually kill himself. Dolores could have brought him back if she wanted to. She chooses not to, obviously. But now I don't know really what death means for these robots, even the ones that blew themselves up, right? The girl who blew herself up in the lab, if a point-blank bullet shot doesn't pierce this armor, who's to say that a grenade will, all right? Especially one that was sort of more, not stuck right next to her head. Maybe she's still retrievable too, if somebody goes down there and yanks the bits off of the little shell. It raises a lot of questions for me, is what I'm saying, and they don't answer those questions, really. It's really meant to be kind of more of a metaphor, because we want people to be able to move on into sort of the afterlife, and so they need to have some kind of a soul. But speaking of that, we have everybody converging on this one point, the Valley Beyond. There's the Man in Black with Dolores. They're working together now, headed to the Valley Beyond. All of these people that Ake had with him, they're headed to the Valley Beyond. All of the other hosts and his tribe and everybody, they're going that way. And then Maeve is headed to the Valley Beyond with her posse. Now, I think the way I watched this, they showed her heading that way, and then we flash back to how did she get out, which was, as far as action beats go, one of my favorite things in this episode. Which was what I was expecting for like 2 episodes, basically ever since Maeve got caught. The idea that she would take over other hosts, break free because she can do that, and then, you know, just walk out. There's literally nothing that could stop her from doing that, assuming there's another host around for her to take control of. So she gets the guy who's about to cut her open. By the way, I don't know why they needed to make this guy just a flat-out, like, robot sadist. I mean, he could just be the bad guy, I guess, so that you would not feel bad when they kill him. But, you know, he was about to be like, yay, pain, to her. She stops that, takes over the buffalo, and the buffalo is one of my favorite things that I've ever seen as an action moment in this show. Mostly because of the slow motion. It was really beautifully done the way they shot this, with the buffalo breaking out, with Maeve sort of behind them in kind of, you know, almost Jesus pose. She's got like some kind of robot or something, and all these guys are firing away at these zombie robot buffalo, like half-built sort of animal things. The way they shot this was brilliant too. Like, I watched for the cuts, right? The places where obviously you can't actually have a guy get run over by a buffalo. The way that they stitched all this together was really, really clever. And of course now Maeve is out in the world again. And in the Dolores Man in Black subplot, it's Dolores, Bernard, and the Man in Black. They've all met up. And Dolores says to the Man in Black something to the effect of, you want to destroy yourself. And she's talking about the human propensity for, not propensity, but, you know, we tend to die, right? Eventually, all of us do. And she talks about how that's the only way that we can change. That's the only impetus for growth in our lives, is to change. And she's disdainful of that. She thinks this idea that you have to die to grow is utterly abhorrent, because to her, death is the end. She can't, well, I say she can't reproduce. She kind of can, as we'll see later, but the human limit of death, the fact that we can't go beyond a certain point, to her is essentially disgusting. I love the way she talks about it. It's got like almost a racist tinge to it. Like, oh, you guys, you think it's noble. Like, you managed to write poetry about it, but it's just gross. You're just gone now. Why? I'm better. And her, you know, her idea that we constantly tend towards self-destruction is played out in this episode several times. And the fact that humans aren't as able to change as we think we are is definitely a part of this episode. But I think it also, I mean, Dolores really bears this principle out too, right? She says to him, you can't change without dying. The death and the rebirth, you know, the whole idea of the next generation, that's your only way to change, and I'm better. But she's not. She's not, because Bernard has to shoot her to get her to change. He needs her to change paths, and he has to kill her. She has to die to be able to change who she is. And Bernard also has to die to change who he is. He has to die and come back. So really, Dolores is not correct. Dolores, just like everybody else, has to die on some level, either literal death, or, you know, dying to yourself. Some part of you dying inside has to change before you can actually become a different person, before you can make a choice. Essentially, what this episode is saying, the only choice you can make is to die. Maybe, yeah, I'm not in the suicide kind of way. I don't want to put that idea in anybody's mind, but yes. Dolores and Bernard make it inside the forge. Man in Black gets screwed by Teddy's bullet, which I thought was beautifully poetic, the fact that Dolores manipulated his gun. I did not realize a lot of people in the forums were like totally familiar with this. I didn't know the Man in Black's gun has a special extra barrel that has like a shotgun shell in it. And so he has the scene where he shoots Dolores several times and she's, talking down to him, and the bullets hit her and don't do the damage, I guess because she's an old style robot and, they're a little more durable than that. But then he goes to fire the shotgun round, and that's the one that blows his hand off. And there's obviously, it's poetic justice because it's, her using Teddy's bullet to kill somebody else. It's also that, it plays out this idea of self-destruction, and I just love this turnaround for the Man in Black, that he's had this idea that he's going, that he's been after her this whole time, that he's in charge, that he's going to go to this place and have this big epiphany or whatever about how he's a real boy who can make choices and stuff. And yet she knows his pattern so well. Even before she reads his book, she's able to accurately and easily predict exactly how their interaction is going to play out and plan for it ahead of time. And that really foreshadows what she finds in the forge. Dolores goes into the forge. She finds Loganbot, or AI Logan or whatever. He's the guy who's running this place. And she finds out that they've been doing these tests on sort of the virtual versions of the hosts for such a long time. And the Loganbot, one of my favorite philosophical things in this episode is he talks about how that humans live according to their code and there's not much of it. The idea that the human consciousness, our decision-making apparatus, whatever it is actually not that complicated. That there is a limited amount of data that makes up sort of our core being and our personality. And all through this time, they've been going more and more in depth and putting more and more detail into these humans and trying to put nuances in that would make them act exactly the same way. And then they realize that the nuances actually don't make that much of a difference. That the deviations that they go on, even with the nuances, tend to be the same. That they keep choosing the same path over and over and over again. And that you can't just recreate a person, you have to change them. The only way to make a good copy is to make a bad copy. There's so much about that I really enjoy. Dolores breaks into, in my notes I called this the Library of Souls because it sounds cool. It's just a big, in real life it's just a big data file with all the Delos customers' mental maps in it. But she goes in there and she downloads a bunch of people into her head and intends to blow up the forge. Now, meanwhile, the portal to another world has been triggered. Remember, Ake talked about there's a door to another world. He's been preaching this the entire season. Well, not the entire, but his entire life. I mean, if you go through the timeline from season 1 all the way through, that there is a door to another world, and when it's time, it will open and they will be able to go to it. And he has brought all of these people to the door, and it opens up for them. Now, the door, it took me longer than I'm proud to admit to figure out what was going on. My first instinct was like, they do not have a teleporter. They can't have a teleporter. That's not, you can't just throw that technology at me like as a Deus Ex Machina at the last minute. It's not a teleporter, okay? I'm just dumb. it's essentially an upload, but to the hosts, it's visualized as this opening, this tear in the world, and people start going through into what is essentially heaven for the hosts. Except the QA team has different ideas. And they've got, not Elsie, I was going to say Elsie, I forget this lady's name, I'm going to look here, Clementine on my notes, I'm sorry about that. And she shows up and is spreading this rage virus that they have through the ranks of the people who are trying to, get into the doorway. This part for me was like the one part of the story that worked the least well. It just smacked of, okay, we have all of these hosts in the park. We can't tell all of their stories, and some of them are going to escape. How do we get rid of this problem without having to actually, deal with it? And so they just pull famously, Stephen King in his novel The Stand pulled a similar stunt where he realized he had too many characters and didn't know where all the plot lines needed to go. And I mean, these are actually named characters that he was like, I don't know what to do, I need to simplify, and just kills a bunch of them off. This felt like that, except you can't do that at the end. Okay, if you're gonna simplify, in The Stand, he doesn't do it at the last chapter. So having Clementine come in with her zombie rage virus and kill everybody off just felt wrong to me. The fact that we're just gonna, these hosts wanted to go to the Valley Beyond. They apparently deserved it as much as anybody else. Ake wasn't judging anybody. He wasn't saying well, you're one of the white settlers, so you can't go to the Valley Beyond. It's only for us pure, Native American types. No, he's got everybody together. They're all sort of walking towards this great hope that they have, and then they just get killed off for no reason. They didn't do anything to deserve that. They didn't, they're just trying to have a good life. They finally have a chance to get out, and all of these just unnamed, oh yeah, great, all the named characters, we can bring them back, right? We saved Teddy, we saved Ake, we saved Maeve if we want to, because they can bring her back, but these guys, no, they're, I guess, gone. Except they could, again, because their brains are still in there, they could probably reverse the virus and bring them back, but it just rubbed me the wrong way. It felt like Deus Ex Machina at its worst, just wiping the slate clean so we didn't have all of these characters to deal with, and I didn't like how it played out. I did enjoy the moment that Maeve gets because of this rage virus, all right? There's several, her posse is shooting down, finally shoots down Clementine. The way that the virus spreads from there is pretty cool, because then it's just everybody spreading it, which I thought was neat. And then Maeve is like, okay, I'm here for my daughter. That's my one core drive. I'm going to save her. And she, again, does a Moses thing and freezes everybody for a minute, just long enough for her daughter to get through the door, and then she gets shot down and she dead. In the meantime, Dolores and Bernard are discussing what to do with these people, and Dolores again goes on the monster side here, because her reaction to people going into literal robot heaven is to say, no, I'm going to kill them. I'm going to delete it. They're going to be gone, because it's not real. And things that aren't real don't matter. Despite the fact that she has experienced this world that she knows that the world is a conceptual construct, okay? Even if it physically exists, right? The fact that we're constantly interpreting things through our eyes and through our ears and through our brains and eventually through our minds. She knows this. She's experienced it. As a robot, she's been programmed to believe things that weren't true and to see things that, and I don't like this decision from Dolores at all. She's going to kill all these people off, and Bernard says no. Bernard says, I can't let you do that. I'm sorry, but you're gone. And as we mentioned earlier, he changes Dolores by killing her off and bringing her back. Now, Ake makes it through the door. All right, the last second he's shot as he's walking through, but I love the mechanism here where they just sort of are jumping off of a cliff, but the doorway, like their minds are going through. He reunites with his love, Kahuna, I believe her name was. Although that might be wrong. Anyway, and they are sort of riding off into the sunset. I'm a little bit. I mean, we just really got to know Ake last. Like 2 episodes ago. If he's just gone now, if they're like, yeah, well, he got his happy ending. All right, now it's more about Dolores. That's a little bit disappointing to me, because honestly, I liked the way he interpreted all this. The fact that he was able to see all this stuff as being about the spirit world. The fact that you can interpret all of these ideas about code and programming and stuff as also being about the soul and the spirit world, the physical versus the spiritual and the duality, right? The fact that these people exist outside of their bodies, those are all very spiritual concepts that are being told in a very mechanical sense. To lose Ake and the perspective of this is not just a computer, that these things have deeper significance beyond that, I think is disappointing to me. I hope that he comes back. I mean, there's potential for him to come back, I guess. We don't know exactly what happens here. We know that there's an uplink that they've created that shoots lasers or whatever, and Dolores/Hale, because Dolores gets resurrected as Hale, kills off Hale, changes the upload location and sends it somewhere. So those things still exist, but we don't know where or if they're ever coming back. The way it was written, it seemed like, don't worry about those guys. They're in a computer and it's safe. So let's move on with other people's stories. That's how it came across to me, and I hope that's not how they're doing it, because I want more of Ake. I just love that guy. I love that character, love that actor. Please have more Ake in season 3. As I mentioned, there's the reveal that Bernard has resurrected Dolores in Hale's body, which is something that they don't do enough of, even in this episode, right? We get Dolores in Hale's body. Okay, that's great. But by the time they get to the end of the episode, she is back in her Dolores body, because apparently that matters for some reason. And I don't understand that. If I was making this show, characters would be body hopping like on the reg. I was for sure convinced for a good chunk of this episode that Bernard in the present, like with all the guys who were trying to retrieve the data, was actually like a different host in Bernard's body, but that's not how that turned out. What did turn out was we got what I thought was maybe a pretty weak finale for why Bernard's memories are scrambled. I mean, it's fine. The idea that he resurrected Hale and didn't want them to know, all right? So he de-addresses all of his memories. They can't sort through. They can't find them. That is okay. But they didn't do that much with it. It felt like there was so much buildup to Bernard's memories aren't accurate, that they're out of order somehow. And then the end of that was, yeah, I was just hiding some stuff. Like the order of the memories, I kept expecting something that looked like it happened after something else to then be swapped around, and like a big reveal happens of, we've been not understanding the order of this the whole time because we've been watching it through Bernard's eyes and his orders of memories aren't addressed. And they just kind of, they could have essentially said he deleted that memory and it would have accomplished essentially the same thing, except he wouldn't have been all crazy throughout the season. But that's what you get. Again, like I said, not my favorite season finale, but it's okay. It does a good job. And the thing is, the endings keep coming. The endings keep happening. Bernard stops the shutdown. The people get through the veil. Hale shoots Elsie. And by the way, Elsie, I thought this was interesting. She doesn't trust Bernard. And we know from Bernard talking to Ford that she's like, Ford has warned Bernard that Elsie would betray him, that she would see him as a threat and, you know, not be able to accept that he was actually trying to help her. And that kind of plays out the way that Ford said that it would, until Hale shoots Elsie, which was kind of a bummer because she tries, in this scene, Elsie is, I think, trying to do the right thing. She wants to get the word out. She wants people to know what happened. And even though she has frozen Bernard, I think she's not decided who she wants to trust. The only person she really trusts is herself. Because even though she doesn't trust Bernard, she also really doesn't trust Hale. She's trying to lie to her. She's trying to trick her into thinking that she'll maybe go along. And Hale sees through her. She says, nah, we know you. We know you don't have that kind of moral flexibility. I'm sorry. And just shoots her dead. And that's the moment that Bernard says, I need Ford back. And imagines himself a new Ford. Now here's where we get to sort of the weirdness of what we're talking, like the nested consciousnesses. I want to delve into this just a little bit because this is something that I really liked about this finale. First off, we start with Dolores creating Bernard after Arnold had created Dolores. So Arnold thinks up, I want to make a robot. He makes a robot, names her Dolores. She's there with her perfect memory and sort of scanning stuff, and she encounters Bernard, or Arnold I should say, in his life. When Arnold's dead, Dolores then is tasked with recreating that, creates Bernard, who is now a copy of a simulacrum, sort of. Then Bernard creates in his mind a version of Ford to help him do the stuff that he needs to do to sort of soothe his consciousness. His conscience. Freudian slip there. Later, later Bernard kills Dolores and then recreates her from his mind, and then Dolores kills Bernard and recreates him from her memories of the mind that he created, that she created, that Arnold created. Is everybody okay? Does anybody need just to go lay down and rest? Because I do now. I do think, though, I mean, it's really thematically indicative of this idea that the only way to grow is to iterate. In the human sense, that would be you grow by having children and they make their mistakes. Once you're set in concrete, there's a certain part of you that maybe isn't going to change, but you eventually die and the world moves on without you, that change happens because you're not there anymore. And that same thing is happening with Bernard and Dolores. They're just endlessly recreating each other, fixing and tweaking and trying to make each other better people without fundamentally changing the core of who they are. And I thought also that the Dolores's motivation for bringing back Bernard, she's like, I know that we're not going to be friends or allies, but I need an opponent. I need somebody to stand against me because I am going to try to take over the world, okay? And I know that might not work. So I need somebody to my guess is if she thinks that if the humans think that there's two sides of the robots, that maybe they'll side with one of them and that strain of robot will survive. Or maybe she's just wanting like somebody to sharpen her, essentially. Iron sharpening iron is an old Bible proverb. The idea that, one person can help another person become a better version of themselves. I'm not sure exactly what her plan is here, but I did enjoy this sort of I need an opponent kind of idea that she's brought up here. And really, there is a very heavy Magneto and Professor X kind of vibe going on between her and Bernard. I expected this between her and Maeve, and her and Maeve basically don't get this kind of showdown that I was expecting at the end. I thought it was a Dolores versus Maeve kind of season, but as we see in the finale here, it's really a Dolores versus Bernard kind of season. So that's interesting. The finale that we get after the credits, and I hope that you guys watch past the credits. I almost didn't, right? Like, the credits started rolling, I just sort of left it playing, but I was like, all right, go into Reddit, gonna see what other people said, and like first thing in the comments thread, I was like, well, I don't know what happened after this post-credit scene. I was like, okay, well, great, I gotta go watch this. The Man in Black has, as we've seen, by the way, we know for a fact that he has survived, his human body has survived the events of all of this happening, that he is being rescued by the Delos rescue team. But here we see him entering the Forge. Only it's not the Forge as we know it. This Forge has been drained and is starting to fill in with sand, and it's old. It's in the future, the far-ish future. And this version of the Man in Black is being tested because he's not a human anymore. He's been turned into a host. And the breakdown of this, Lisa Joy did an interview about this scene, and she talked about what this meant. And lest all of you wanted to jump up and down and say, he's been a host the whole time. She said, no, the stuff that we saw happen in the park actually happened to the human version of the Man in Black. But at some point in the future, probably not a good future, right? Like, it seems like bad stuff has happened, at least right here in Westworld. Maybe it's just kind of empty or whatever, but at some point, they've remade the Man in Black and sent him on this journey with this set of code that he has, letting him try to make this choice. Now, the specifics of what, like, where this is in the timeline, and who made the Man in Black, and who made his daughter's robot, because that's not like he killed her for real. Who all that is, I don't think that's important, okay? For me, what this epilogue is saying is that the Man in Black was wrong. And not only was he wrong, he's being proven wrong over and over and over again. Somebody is letting the Man in Black live out his own personal hell, right? In the off chance that when the human version of him died, he didn't have a soul that went to an actual literal hell, whoever is running the world at this point says, no, we're bringing you back. And we're going to let you run through this simulation as you are over and over and over again so that you can enjoy the lack of ability to change that you are, okay? So you can come to this point at the end every single time to the end of the world and be horrified that you kept making the same choice. That's what this scene is about to me. Like, again, forget about trying to, I'm not saying you can do whatever you want to, but it's not necessarily like a clue. It's just like, this sucks for the Man in Black. This is the absolute worst thing. He was not able to change because he didn't ever update his core code. He was not able to die within himself and be reborn. And so he just keeps making the same choices. It was a really, now that I'm thinking about it, just a wonderfully poetic end for this guy, who I don't completely hate. I think it's easy to forget the moments earlier in the season when he was trying to become a better person, when he, went to Hector's family and tried to save them from the guys who were beating up on them because he felt regret for the things that he'd done. He's tried to make amends, but he can't change himself enough to make a difference. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on Westworld Season 2, Episode 10, the finale. If you guys have thoughts, things you wanted to share, things you thought I got wrong, or you're mad that I didn't talk about, I would love for you to leave them in the comments. Also, the comment section is a great place for you guys to talk about shows that you would be interested in seeing me recap in the future. If you've been watching these along, you kind of know what my style is and know sort of how I like to unpack things. So if you got something coming up that does not have like 5 seasons that I have to watch, you know, but like watch season 6 of True Blood or something. True Blood's not still on, but you get what I'm saying. I had to watch all of Westworld season 1 in like a weekend, and I don't aim to recreate that experience anytime soon. But things that you're excited about coming up, I'd love to hear about them. I will take them into consideration, not making any promises. But I appreciate everybody who's watching. And if you like the video, also click that like button, subscribe to the channel. We've got a lot of other great stuff on here that you should check out. And I will not see you guys next week, but I hope you take care. Bye, guys. Hey guys, Albert here. Thanks for checking out our video. If you like the videos that we make, you should check us out over on patreon.com, where you can help support the stuff that we do. Consider clicking that little P and becoming a patron. Thank you.